Good morning. This is Playing to Win with me, Mark Henderson Leary, and my good friend Brad Freyer. And you look like you were ready for that this morning. Were you ready for that?
As ready as I always feel like I'm going to be. It's a great way to wake up on a Monday morning.
It's so funny because we're getting ready to hit this and hit the button and we go, and then it's the countdown, and then it's like suddenly oh man. Like we got to go. This has to happen, and I have to be on. And I literally kind of get to the starting stance, like I'm about to like run, like the starting gun's about to go, and I gotta get off the line. That's actually literally what I was doing.
Love it. Well, I mean, it's how you act that influences how you feel. So if you act like you're about to run a race, if you act like you're about to come out of the gate strong, then that's the way you're going to feel.
Yeah, that's what happened. And so it's interesting morning. Given that it's I could talk about so many things right now. I know we just talking about something totally different relative to this, but I just have to just sort of rave that I'm in a new suite from last time.
Okay.
And I didn't move it here. And so I got a new person on the team, and she just crushed it getting the stuff out up here. And I didn't come up here over the weekend while it was all moving. I did my session on Friday. I went home. I dealt with the kids and all that kind of stuff. And I came back to put my key into a different door on a different floor, walked in and and that's one of the reasons I was running cables across the floor and doing things to make sure things were working, which turns out I didn't even need to do. But man, it just, being prepared and having a team, having people on the team who can make things happen. God, I'm just so grateful for what that is, to be able to not have to be the only one make things happen and to rely on other people whose skill set is different than yours. So
it's a beautiful thing.
I think that's because the topic you and I are going to talk about is good habits. I think in long game. Good habits, long game, understanding the cycles for if you're in a time of abundance, how to take advantage of that. When knowing the cycle is going to come and take away, how do you be ready for that? And I don't know. I think there's some team element to bring into that as well. So,
yeah, I mean, certainly, I think the biggest driver for that is that all around us right now, people are thriving, right? I mean, businesses are booming, and you can make the argument, well, there's a lot of doom and gloom, whether it's the war, whether it's oil and gas prices, whatever it might be. At the end of the day, the market's thriving, and businesses, at least the ones that you and I have been talking about, are doing very well. And so, the idea being that it's easy during the boom times to get fat, dumb, and lazy, right? To just sit back, rest on our laurels, and expect this time to always go. Or even worse is to take these times for granted and not continue to do the healthy things to tee yourself up or to hedge for when things turn, because inevitably things are going to turn.
So as you were describing that, an age-old question, age-old for me because I'm old, is whenever somebody talks about this, or I talk to somebody who's doing well, or I see somebody on stage who's talking about their experiences, the question I've always sort of simmered in the back of my mind is, how do you know the difference between being good and lucky? I mean, like, you're in an abundant time. How do you or wherever that is, because sometimes people are in abundant times and in times of abundance, and it's like, well, this is very straight logical. Other times it's like, hey, we're doing really well, even though other people are not. And it has been said many times, it's like, we were crushing it, so we felt really smart. And then the humbling came to us. Most entrepreneurs have had that humbling experience. And so to me, the real awareness is, okay, it's a time of abundance right now. For whatever reason, how do you stay humble to know the truth as to what's at work here, so you can build on that formula and preserve that? So answer.
Yeah. And so, I think a healthy dose of fear is probably a good thing, and not like fear that creates anxiety and sleepless nights, but a healthy dose of fear of, okay, what if this factor changes? Okay, what if this factor changes? Okay, and rather than assuming it's going to always stay the same, right? because I don't know that when you were saying that, I don't know that it matters if you're good or lucky, right? Because I think it's probably both. In order to have been in a position to take advantage of the luck, you probably had to be good enough to get to that point, right? And so, chicken or the egg, and we've all heard the old adage, right? Luck is when planning meets opportunity, or preparation meets opportunity, whatever the anecdote that you've heard is. And so whatever's created the abundance, I don't think it matters, but I do think that you bring in the more important piece, which is that humility, right? So even if, whether you were lucky or whether you were good in a time of abundance, I think it's appreciating it, not taking it for granted, not bowing up your chest and oh, look what I did, but trying to optimize, trying to make the most of it, but then also keeping that eye on the horizon and saying, okay, what could be up ahead? Are there flashing yellow lights up ahead? Do I see brake lights? Do I see, caution signs? Because too often, if you, just to continue that analogy of driving a car, too many people drive their business car staring at the edge of the hood, right?
Yeah.
What's right ahead of me? What's right in front of me? No, we don't have time for that. We got to work on what's right in front of me. But you got to have your eyes up on the horizon a little bit. There's, to your point, right? Here's where the team comes in.
Yeah.
The team should be focusing in on what's right in front of me. You as a leader, you as an entrepreneur, you as the driver of the business, you have to have your eyes up on the horizon and, to see what lays ahead. And you should have good team members, like this weekend move.
Yeah.
Not the best use of your time. And had you not had somebody on your team to do that, you would have been spending your time worrying about moving furniture, worrying about rehooking, worrying about running cables. And so how much distraction would that have been towards the next 2 weeks of your business? And that's a small task, right? That's just moving shit up a floor.
Well, I think, the car is a great analogy, right? So, we could take it kind of the nth degree, but think about F1. It's a little extreme. It's a lot extreme, actually. How much team and how much science goes into that. But the metaphor, I think this is great, right? So you decide you sort of not wake up. I think that some entrepreneurs have found themselves in a car going pretty fast. They like driving sounds good, and I'll be in the car and it's a business. Okay, cool. We're moving, and then. They're looking wherever they're looking. Maybe it's over the edge of the hood. Maybe it's a little down the road, and they're like, I know where we're going. In fact, I can see over the horizon in my mind, and we're going to go so fast. But we're in the car so fast that no one snapped that they were on a downward hill the whole time. And under the hood, no one looked. No motor. It's not even in there. So now, so it's like we're going to have a problem.
With this. Yeah.
So I think that entrepreneurship, okay, great. You're going fast. Let's take a step back. It's a car. It needs wheels. They need to be steered. They need tires that need to have grip. You need a motor. It's got to have the right horsepower, the right torque. It's got to have fuel. Let's make sure those are in place, and let's find a way to test them. Because if you get all that profit and your margins are solid and products flying out the door, where's this going? And so you find situations where oh man, we are just crushing it in this business. And wow, my automatic lights turned off. Let's see if I can come on, automatic lights.
Keep talking. You're good.
There we go. And I'm back. So if your product is something that you started selling in a pandemic, is it a product that sells outside of a pandemic? You should know. I mean, some of it's obvious, right? There's certain pandemic PPE type of things that they're selling, but you'd be surprised. I've talked to some companies who kind of love the idea that the new pandemic PPE selling world is a forever thing. And we're finding out that hand sanitizers demand right now is not what it was 2 years ago or even a year ago. And so gloves and face shields, those things is, at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone probably would have said, yeah, you can sell those for a while. Well, then the pandemic lasted a little longer, right? And so the new world sort of felt like the new forever world. And so I think people are having a hard time letting go of the idea that some of the things they've been doing are not going to be the things you do forever. So anyway, I think you got to take a step back, and having that team and having people who can come to this and assess the elements of the business that aren't the things that you're great at is going to be pretty important.
Well, and so to take it out of an anecdote and into real life, what are the things that folks should be doing? Whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're a producer, salesperson, whatever that might be, and you're in the midst of a high cotton right now, meaning that everybody's coming out of the woodworks to give you business, and if you're saying things like, I've got so much going on right now, I don't know how to keep it all straight.
Right.
Whether you're a producer, whether you're a manager, or whether you're an owner or a leader, when things are good, you have to be thinking about, okay, what are some little things that we can do right now to make sure that the flywheel doesn't just come to a screeching halt, right? If I'm a salesperson, I highly encourage salespeople. The best time to be prospecting and selling is when you're in the midst of high cotton, right? Because what do you look like? What do you act like? What do you sound like when you're thriving? You have confidence, you have belief, you have conviction. And so now's the time to go out and network. Now's the time to go out and find new opportunities, not because you have to, but because it's going to be the most non-threatening and comfortable for you. Because if you don't get a prospect, it doesn't matter, because you're going to be fine. But generating those conversations, generating the dialogues. If you're a manager, what should you be looking for? You should be looking to improve processes. You should be looking to top grade your team. You should be looking for opportunities to become more effective, more efficient, right? It's not accepting status quo. It's being aware of the future. If you're the leader, the owner of the company, right? Being aware, okay, so what are those road bumps that could come along? And are they just things that will fill a little bit of a jar, or is it a pothole that's going to, give us a blowout and dent our rim?
Right.
What's up ahead, and what do I need to be doing to prepare for that? Is it creating a cash stockpile for a potential bump in the road?
Well, it's a great example. I want to dig into this because I think there's two reasons that people don't do this. One is arrogance and hubris, and that comes with youth. It's you see it around, but it's not actually it's not. I don't think it's actually the biggest reason right now that people would not do that. Because as I was listening to this, I almost started feeling like we could start sounding like we're kind of admonishing people for doing stuff that they already know they should be doing, because of the conversation we had last week in particular. Hiring is difficult, and it's like, yeah, man, Mark, I know I'm supposed to be doing this stuff, but I'm too busy. Like I got to make money. I got to take care of my clients. And so there has to be sort of, what do you do in those time constraints? And how do you break this down to the highest priorities, given that you may be freaking out that you're not taking care of those future things, but like you're trying to keep up with demand and you're trying to hire people and you're trying to do those things.
Yeah, you can't say this is a priority for me, but I'm too busy, right? Because anytime someone tells me I don't have time or I didn't have time, the first thing I'm going to ask them is, well, tell me what you've done then. Because it's time management is a misnomer, right? You can't manage time. Time is finite, and it keeps going no matter what you're doing. What you have to identify is priority management, right? Priority management is deciding what's most important for me, right. Short term, midterm, long term. And if you tell me, Brad, finding new people, finding good quality people is a priority, but I just don't have time, I'm going to challenge you and say, okay, well, let's look at how you spent the last 50, 60-hour week, and let's break down what you used your time on that you shouldn't have, or let's find the time to fit in those activities, because you have time for stuff.
Right. And I think that's exactly right, because if we sit here and list all the things that you should be doing, we're gonna be shitting all over the listeners. It's like, I know I suck. I know I suck, but and it's like, okay, no, you don't suck. You have a lot going on. Fair enough. the idea though is, okay, take a minute, like maybe, and if a minute's too hard for you, take an hour. Because if a minute's too hard for you, it's going to take way more than a minute for you to figure out what's up. You don't know what the priorities are. The buzzing and all the urgencies are going to be you're going to be just flooded emotionally like that. And that whole meditation thing, if you can't take 5 minutes to meditate, you better take an hour or 10 minutes. It sounds ridiculous the first time you hear it. It's like, that's just stupid. But there's actually pragmatism to that. Like if you literally are so overwhelmed, like 15 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, it just seems impossible. Then it is pointless to take the 5 minutes, because you'll just sit there the whole 5 minutes just like, is this over yet? Is this over?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you got to take a step back, and if you have a small team, or if you have any kind of team, then you need to take that team aside and say, all right, guys, let's really. There's 100 things we could do. Yeah, we got bandwidth for 1, 2, or 3 maybe, and what are they? And do that every quarter, and that's of course the US pulse, but every quarterly pulse for every system and every business is really that prediction discipline. Like, what do we need to do that isn't going to take care of itself? That we're going to have to decide, and if we just kind of leave this stew of 100 things we should be doing, we'll do none. So we got to do, like exactly we said, priority management. It's a priority choosing. We got to choose our priority and fit it in bit by bit. And if you don't have a team, then that's part of the process. You can and should do the same discipline with yourself. I do the same thing with my personal life. We do this at the family level. We do, and then we do this at the company. And so all this idea of taking the pause and saying, what are the priorities for the next period, next week, next month, next quarter, whatever your period you're trying to figure out is, you might have to just make the priorities list even smaller.
Prime example, right? I always use this example, but I'll use a more specific one, is exercise, right? For most people, they'll say, well, exercise should be a priority because, I heard an interview recently with Buffett, and he said, if I was going to buy you a car, you could pick any car that you wanted, but it was going to be the only car that you were going to have for your lifetime. What car would you pick? But more importantly, what would you do to that car? How would you treat that car? How would you manage that car? How would you service that car, right? If you knew it was the only car you were ever going to have, you would treat it substantially different than you probably treat the vehicles you have now. Your body, you only have one, right? And so, most people, conceptually understand that, but they don't do what it takes. And so, I've had people in the past say, Brad, I don't have time to work out. I'm just so busy. I've got da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, okay, well, I have a very similar lifestyle. I get up at 5 a.m. to work out. And, I'm not a morning person. I couldn't get up that early. Okay, well, what does getting up that early require me to do? Well, guy, you probably go to bed early. Exactly. Right. Yeah. I go to bed at 9:30. Well, I like to stay up a little bit later. And okay, well, what do you do between 9:30 and 11? Well, I'm usually on the couch watching TV. Okay. So priorities. Is exercise a higher priority than vegging in front of a TV for an hour and a half or 2 hours in the evening, right? It's priority management, not time management.
Yeah, and the formula there, there's lots in that. You said a ton of stuff. It is priority management, and it absolutely parallels back to business. The question you have to ask is, at what cost? I want to stay up late.
Here's where I was going with this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, where I was going with this is identifying what your priorities in your business should be, and then figuring out how do you make time for them? Because a lot of for leaders, right? Sometimes we're doing things we shouldn't be doing. It's just busy work that we've enjoyed because we've done it since the beginning, and so we need to delegate it. Maybe we need to hire people to pick up roles and responsibilities. Maybe there's things that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing anymore, right? If you've never managed your calendar color coded, right? Different colors meaning different types of activities, and then measured your time over a month period and figured out where the majority of your time is being spent. It is a great exercise. I've done it multiple times throughout my professional career. Lights on. But if you haven't managed where your time's going, I think you'd be surprised. And have your calendar coded every minute of your 50-hour work week, right? Yeah. Every minute, know where it is. Even if it's a bio break or lunch or a walk around the block, because then you can really identify where your time is being spent. Now, that doesn't mean that you take out the walk around the blocks or take out the bio breaks. No, those are critical, right? And in fact, most studies would show that you need a 15-minute break for every hour of work if you want to keep your brain in that productive place. If you work 3 hours straight through, there's a probability that you're going to be worthless for the next hour, hour and a half, right? Because of the way our brains function. And so you're measuring your time and identifying the priorities and purging your calendar to make sure that there's room for the priorities that they get done. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, there's a couple disciplines there. So the idea of at what cost, that's a question that, and this is all time back. Hopefully I'll make this connect. Then two main disciplines in your business, in your like we can't because we're what? Or this is so great. We're actually, our goal was 40 and we're at 80. Okay. Sounds amazing. At what cost? For every benefit, there's a cost. For every cost, there is a benefit. And that is it's like the law of conservation of energy. Understand that at all times. If things are going really well, you're hopefully upgrading your problems to problems you like better. But if you're not careful, you will not. You will be upgrading the problems or downgrading the problems you like much less.
Or creating new ones.
Creating new ones. You might, if you're creating all this, look at all the cash. This is great. Okay, now my employees are all leaving in mass exodus because they're burned out and they hate me and they realize that I'm taking the money and they're not getting their share of it or whatever the situation is. You can really create real problems there. And so that's the macro level. But see, budget. I mean, the idea of the budget is so powerful. Understanding a budget in a business, understanding a budget in your life, and you can take it all the way down to a time budget, just like what you were saying. You can figure out how if. I think working out is, for me, actually, is a good example. There's 14 different ways I could work out. I would love to do CrossFit. I would love to do martial arts. I would love to do more weight training. I would love to be on my bike. I would love to be I would love to be running. And so, since I can't do all of those, but I have decided that the time budget for working out is greater than 0 and less than 10 hours. Somewhere in there's a few hours, and I've discovered that for me, running is sort of the cornerstone. There's lots of things I want to do, and right behind running is weight training. And so if I have to keep scaling it down, I understand the highest bang for the buck, and I understand where the budget sits on that. And I know that if I don't do that, I know what the cost is. I know what comes from that. I know my energy lags. I enjoy life less. My thinking is less clear, and I've experimented, and that's part of how I've gotten there. And that might be a problem too. Like for those people who have not been through either overly abundant or overly scarce businesses or overly abundant or scarce lives, everybody tells me I should be working out, but they haven't done the experimentation to know the difference, and they're working towards an unhealthy life, and they're like, well, they've never really known anything else. So how would so it's the goldfish in the fish tank. You're telling me there's water all around here? I don't get it. So it's like, you're telling me there's a better, that I'm not living an unhealthy life. It's the same life I've always lived. So you sometimes might have to put yourself into a very serious unhealthy state as a human being, some diabetic state, before you have to push really hard back into, this is what healthy lifestyle is like. Now I understand what it would be like to drive this car my entire life and not have it making sounds, going down the freeway with dragging tailpipe. And the business is the same thing. I will say this, if you've been through it and you know what to expect, the cost, your antidote is to do the prioritization, to take that quarterly pulse and ask, what are the 3 to 7 most important things we can do to build for the future? Make sure you've got the whole healthy engine. If you've never been through it, if you always have lived what you think is a healthy lifestyle, if you're in a business that you've always been smart, guess what? Life is going to come find you, and you should be ready, and you should get with some more senior people and experienced people to figure out what could go wrong and find some humility and pick 1 or 2 things to some good habits to adopt from people who know better. And have been
that reminds me, it's the old adage, tell a child there's a billion stars in the sky and they'll believe you. Tell them that the stove is hot and they have to touch it. For some of these things, we can tell people all day long, you got to do this, but they have to touch the stove in order to really have that belief that, I do need to do that.
I want to give a shout out to Shobi John, who gave us a comment this morning. So it's good to hear from you, Joby. We'll have to catch back up, brother. But yeah, thanks for the feedback. It's on LinkedIn. I don't even know if the LinkedIn comments show up on Facebook. I don't think they do. I
don't know. I'm just here. But thank you, Shelby.
Shobi. Can you not see it? Yeah.
I can't. No, I don't get any of that.
Yeah, okay. I'm the tech guy.
I'm on the user end, not the host end. I don't know.
I guess that's right.
But no, yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate, and that's why with so many people that have worked with in the past, I try to make it There we go. Now I see it.
Yeah.
Great. So for me, so much of what I try to encourage is just the small things, right? You know, for instance, I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits, but you know, creating those small habits to create the momentum. So if your goal is to start exercising, rather than planning to start exercising on day one, maybe the goal is just to get out of bed and put your gym clothes on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just create some forward momentum. You know, I've always shared, you know, for me, it's the, you know, getting up in the morning and working out is just a function of standing up. Because I know if I stand up, that habit will push me forward. And so in business, right? If it's activities, like if you're a producer, if you're in sales and you want to do a little bit of prospecting while you're in high cotton, you know, maybe it's just making one dial a day, right? You know, think about one dial a day is 5 a week. That's 20 some odd a month. That's, you know, 250 a year. That's a decent amount of activity cumulatively that's going to have compounding interest. And if you do one, you might sit there one day and be like, you know what, I got a little bit of free time. I'm going to make 3 today. I'm going to go crazy. Or if you're a leader, right? If you're a leader and you're trying to, maybe your thing is that you need to be top grading your team in high cotton times and investing back in your people, you know, doing a little bit of recruiting, you know, reaching out a little bit, going to networking events and finding that talent in obscure places. But just a little bit of activity. It doesn't have to be monumental. And I think that's the piece that gets people intimidated, is feeling like it's going to be this life change, but it doesn't have to be. It can be one small thing in a healthy direction, right?
Yeah.
That can really change trajectory or buffer for the future.
Well, I agree 100%. I want to make sure he answers the question really as practically as possible for all the different reasons or different ways this could come up. Is if you're in a time of abundance, have you done the right things to prepare for when it's not so abundant? The number one most important thing is to understand why you do what you do. I believe it's really easy to lose sight of that if things are super profitable. And I think the oil and gas industry was always so good at that. The reason for being was making money. And so when the game changed, when the margins got a little more consistently leaner, purpose started to matter, and people started migrating and moving away. And it's really tough to attract. It's very tough to attract people in the oil and gas industry right now because the purpose side of things is so very, very weak because they never had to build that muscle. And so if you happen to be doing this business and it's going great, money's not enough because things will go down. That much is consistent. I guess there's certain unicorn businesses now, every business at some point is going to run out of the margin. And so you're going to have to be there for a reason. And if you don't know what it is, you better start looking. If you do know what it is, double down on it and make sure you're collecting people who also share that purpose. And that purpose needs to inform the rest, the main disciplines of the business. Talking about if you're driving that car, is there a motor? Are there tires? Well, in your business, there's just only a couple fundamental disciplines you got to really understand well, and that is how to tell the story and get people to be customers, right? How to get out there. It's the marketing and selling aspect. What do you know as a visionary leader of your organization about that? What do you really know about why people buy from you and how people buy from you in terms of signing over their money in exchange for the problem? Operationally, there's a craft there, something you do in exchange for money. How good are you at it? Do you have people who are excited about being good at your craft and the thing, your product, your service, whatever, that really do that well and understand the purpose? And of course, finance, you really want to manage the cash and your profitability that needs to be in place. And especially if you as the visionary leader, need to be thinking about what the cycle is going to look like. How much cash are you going to need to have? So if those disciplines are in place, you have a sense of purpose. You should start making sure your leadership is right for that and telling that story. And you got the right people in the right seats. And then your job as a visionary leader is to be thinking about, where's this going? Seeing around the corner. When's this going to end? Is this going to get worse, better? What's going on with that? And that's all there is to it. But that's a lifetime's worth of disciplines. And you should, I guess I use the word should. I would challenge you. How much do you know about each of those? How much do you know about the future of the business and where it's going? How much do you know about the disciplines and how good you are? And how could you handle, if you were really hit with a big challenge and everything was 30% more expensive and 30% harder to sell, and you had 30% less people, what would glue it together? Would you still have people on the boat or on the bus, depending on your metaphorical vehicle, who are like championing the cause or purpose or passion of being on this team and what we do together as a team?
Well, you got 20 seconds. Can you wrap it up in that?
I thought the last person who speaks is summed up by the other person.
Well, here we go. Here's what I'll say is you don't have to go through a slump,
right? But
you have to be prepared to pivot. You have to be prepared for the road bumps and the curves ahead. Do a little bit every day to prepare for what the future holds. Don't rest on your laurels, and you can continue to thrive.
And you know what? I'll sum it up even one more. I love everything says right. Plans are worthless. Planning is everything. Be prepared. Think it through. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Brad.
Bye.
Bye.